Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 259, Lapras of Luxury. The episode begins with Ash and the gang having arrived at a Pokemon Center on the way to Newbark Town as they were getting pretty close. Just then, though, while Ash and the gang were in the center, they get a call from Professor Elm on one of the center's computers. Ash takes the opportunity to inform Elm that he had collected all of the Johto Gym badges and was heading back to Newbark Town to register for the Silver Conference. Elm congratulates Ash on getting all 8 of the badges, but Misty cuts him off, wondering how he'd known to call this Pokemon Center specifically. So Elm responds that Oak told him that they were coming back to Newbark Town already, so he figured that they would come into the center since it was on the way. Elm then reveals his reason for calling, explaining that a local Pokemon professor had an egg that he wanted another professor, being Elm, to examine, and Elm promised that he would come pick it up, but unfortunately, Elm had found himself pretty busy with his research today, so he didn't have time. Therefore, he wanted Ash and the gang to be his slaves and go pick it up for him at the Marine Pokemon Laboratory just past the Pokemon Center, and also requested that they deliver the egg back to him when they come back to Newbark Town. Not having anything else to do in the center, Ash and the gang agreed to help out Elm, also because they thought that the egg must have been important if it had to be personally picked up as opposed to delivered. So, with that, they end the call with Elm and go to the Marine Laboratory, which was located on a pier just past the center, and when they enter, they find no one inside. Suddenly, though, a woman runs out from the back room of the laboratory and goes out onto the pier. She looked to be carrying some research equipment, so Ash and the gang came to the conclusion that she was the professor they were looking for, and raced after her onto said pier to find out about the egg. Although Brock rushed after her because he was immensely attracted to her and wanted to chase after her to flirt with her, as usual, thinking that this girl liked him as well, and just happened to think that Brock's whereabouts were on the pier, so that's why she was going there. Yeah, fucking dumbass, that's obviously not the case. Anyways, since the researcher had a head start, she got onto the pier first and began setting up some research equipment, such as a sonar dish and a laptop, and sends out her lantern into the water to use supersonic, which distributes sonar waves all throughout the water, which get transmitted through the sonar dish to the researcher's laptop, and she watches for something to appear on the laptop. Before anything can actually appear, though, Ash and the gang, with Brock leading, arrive, as Brock declares his feelings for the researcher, only for the researcher to tell him to shut the fuck up, complaining that Brock was preventing her from listening to her lantern's sound waves and preventing her from focusing on the laptop. Just then, Ash and the gang hear a sound which the researcher explains was a song being sung by some Pokémon. And soon enough, the sound of the singing emanates from the laptop as several points appear on the laptop's screen as well. Ash inquires as to what those points were, leading the woman to reveal that they were the Pokemon she was studying, being a Lapras, which were also the ones that were singing. With the waves transmitted, the woman requests her lantern to come back up to the pier, and just as it does so, all of the Lapras that were making those sounds and appeared on the computer screen through dots arrived from under the water, amazing Ash and the gang, and particularly the researcher. Suddenly, as Ash and the gang and the researcher were watching the herd of Lapras, 2 adults separated from it, and one of them came up to Ash. Confused at first, he soon hugs it, as he remembers it as none other than his Lapras that he rode back during the Orange Islands that he had released to go back with its herd. This is only solidified when Lapras hugs Ash back, showing affection towards him, as we see a flashback of Ash releasing Lapras back during the Orange Islands, and Ash then realizes that the reason why he didn't initially recognize Lapras was because it was now a lot older. And Ash soon recognizes the other Lapras that had detached from the rest of the herd to be his Lapras' mother. The researcher was amazed by Ash's Lapras, citing how it looked even more beautiful than all of the other Lapras, leading Ash to explain that it was likely because of all of the experience that it had helping him travel along the Orange Islands, as he explained all of his travels, and even some of the battles that Lapras had gotten into. Ash and the gang then introduce themselves, starting with Brock, who tries to flirt with her, although Misty drags him off as usual, and upon hearing Ash's name, the researcher reveals herself as Naomi, a marine biologist and the director of the Marine Laboratory, and also the professor that Elm had sent Ash to go visit to retrieve the egg, and clarified that she had it as she took Ash and the gang back inside her laboratory. Before she shows them the egg, she decides to explain to them about the marine biology research she was doing regarding the Lapras. Specifically, she was studying the Lapras' migration process and how they were able to communicate with each other during it, and how they all ended up in the same spot at the exact same time, pointing out the spot where the Lapras usually migrated to on a map, and revealed that the Lapras' travel routes appeared to be linked to water temperature and season, and reveals that the leader of the herd, known as the Mother, was the one who initially found these travel routes that had ideal water temperature and during the ideal season to boot, and they would be the one to somehow inform the other Lapras from all over where to migrate to, explaining that this was likely possible due to the leader having a different sounding voice as opposed to the other Lapras, so all the other Lapras were able to easily differentiate the leader's calls from any regular calls from other Lapras, so they knew when it was time to migrate. She then played several recordings, one of the leader Lapras' voice as it made calls, and the other of the regular Lapras' voices when they responded to the calls as they had started migrating. Ash and the gang were interested by this, but they were more so interested on how Naomi was able to find the specific spot where they were able to migrate, remembering the dots that had come up on her computer, leading Naomi to reveal to them her lantern's ability to use supersonic to send out waves that could detect the Lapras' singing. And once she heard the singing, it made it easier for the laptop to track them because of the supersonic waves reaching them, and therefore she could find out where they migrated to. Also clarifying that it took a lot of studying with her lantern to be able to figure out that it could do something like that. And states that she was able to put in that much studying with her lantern because she was so dedicated to finding out everything about the Lapras, believing that they were the key to understanding all water Pokemon in Kanto and Johto, and their migration patterns. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were in their Gyarados sub, yeah that's right, not Magikarp now, and they were watching the Lapras from a monitor inside of the sub and planned on capturing them, since James suggested that they could use the Lapras as water taxi services, and not only use them for themselves so that they wouldn't have to rely on cheap-ass submarines, but they could also rent them out to other people and make a whole bunch of money. Jessie was extremely excited by the prospect of making money, so she went along with James' suggestion as they set off to capture the Lapras. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, after explaining everything about Lapras and her research, she decided to finally show Ash and the gang the egg that Elm had sent them to get, which was inside of a wooden box, which she opened up, revealing the green-colored egg, and explaining that it was rescued from a group of Pokemon poachers, and explained that they had stolen it from the Pokemon Preserve on Mount Silver, which was very close by to the Silver Town, where the Silver Conference was taking place. Ash and the gang then ask how the egg was recovered from the poachers, leading Naomi to explain that she was visiting the Pokemon Preserve on Mount Silver when it was reported by the staff on the preserve that the egg had been stolen, so she had managed to track it down using her professor research skills, and found out that the poachers must have dropped it as they were retreating to their base, as she just found it in the middle of the road and then picked it up, and clarified that the reason why she wanted to give it to Professor Elm was because he also happened to be the advisor of the Pokemon Preservation Council, so he would know exactly what to do with the egg. I guess that explained why Elm was so busy. He was a professor and a preservation guy? Damn. Just then, Ash and the gang and Naomi hear a Lapras call out to them, so they run out onto the balcony of the lab, thinking that something bad might have happened to the Lapras, but Ash sees that it was merely his Lapras calling to him to play. Misty, Brock, and Naomi encourage Ash to go play with Lapras to make it happy, with Misty stating that it had been a very long time since Ash and Lapras had spent some time together. So, with that, Ash jumps down from Naomi's balcony onto the pier and hops on Lapras, with Pikachu still on his shoulder. This led Lapras to speed around the water all afternoon, just like old times. Although Ash initially thought that Lapras was going faster than he remembered, but he quickly got used to it, before almost falling off when Lapras made a few jumps, hitting some waves, and almost toppled itself over when it went atop a large wave. As night fell, Ash was very impressed on Lapras's increased power and ability to surf, as it was never able to surf before, and suggests that all of this growth must have been because it was able to train with its family, and realized that releasing Lapras was the better decision after all. Ash then explains to Lapras that Lapras wasn't the only one who had been growing, as he explains that he now had all 8 Johto League badges, and shows them off to Lapras. Just then, back on the balcony of Naomi's lab, Brock, Misty, and Naomi heard all of the Lapras cry out, so they ran out onto the pier, only to see that all of the Lapras had been caught in a giant net, and the perpetrators soon revealed themselves as they surface in their Gyarados sub, of course being Team Rocket, as they do their motto while in bathing suits, and trying their best to relax in the water while doing so, while James tries to surf as well. I don't know how you can relax and surf immensely fast at the same time, but I guess some people can do it. Team Rocket were about to make their escape when suddenly Ash and his Lapras showed up, having heard the cries as well, as they both demand Team Rocket to release the Lapras, with Ash's Lapras using Ice Beam to try and stop Team Rocket from escaping, but James counters with a smokescreen by sending out his wheezing, which blinds Ash and the gang and Lapras and makes them cough, which in turn stops Lapras from releasing its Ice Beam, allowing Team Rocket to make their escape. However, even though Ash or Lapras, or Naomi, Brock, and Misty for that matter, couldn't see anything, Lapras was still able to hear the other Lapras' cries, so it was able to follow the Team Rocket's Gyarados sub. Naomi, Brock, and Misty wanted to be of help as well, and thankfully, Naomi revealed that she had her own submarine that was better than Team Rocket's fucking Gyarados sub, and told Brock and Misty to get inside with her, as they followed Ash and Lapras, who were following Team Rocket. However, Lapras couldn't seem to go fast enough, as Team Rocket, noticing Ash and Lapras behind them, used the booster weapons that they had added onto their upgraded Gyarados sub to increase their speed, leaving Ash and the gang behind as they disappeared in the water. This obviously made Ash and the gang and Naomi realize that they were going to have to follow Team Rocket underwater, and since Ash couldn't survive underwater on Lapras, Naomi, Misty, and Brock urged him to hop in the submarine with them, as he did, promising Lapras that together they would rescue its herd no matter what, as the submarine dived underwater, following Lapras, who had also dived underwater, leading Ash and the gang to Team Rocket, since it could still hear the other Lapras' cries. As Lapras and the submarine continued on, Lapras became so determined to find its herd that it managed to speed up, despite going slower, leading Naomi to have to increase the speed on the submarine as well. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket and their Gyarados sub, they were immensely happy to have captured all of the Lapras. Just then, though, their happiness was stopped by both Wobbuffet forcibly popping out of its Pokeball, forcing Jessie to recall it, and their Gyarados sub knocking them onto the ground. Team Rocket were very curious as to what was going on, and Meowth was the first one to spot on the monitor, as he pointed it out to Jessie and James, that all the Lapras were trying to escape by shaking the net, which was in turn shaking the submarine. Team Rocket wanted this to stop, but they soon wished for the shaking to continue, as at least that wasn't freeing the Lapras. But when the Lapras leader then bit down on the net, cutting it open, this allowed all of the Lapras to escape, with the exception of the leader Lapras, because it was letting all of its younger ones leave first, as well as one other Lapras. Jessie was not satisfied with only having 2 more Lapras, having lost all the others, but she decided to take what she could get, as she ordered Meowth to turn on the turbo engines on the Gyarados sub to make them go so fast that they could immediately resurface out of the water, due to the pressure that the engines would apply. But Meowth rebuttals that for some reason the extra engines on the Gyarados sub weren't working, and he couldn't explain why. Just then, James suddenly spotted a whole bunch of whirlpools approaching the Gyarados sub and the 2 Lapras that were still in the net, and they got swept into the whirlpools, just as they realized them to be the cause of the engines not working to their fullest extent. As for all the other Lapras that had escaped, Ash's Lapras, along with Ash, Naomi, Brock, and Misty, were able to locate them all, very much relieving Ash and the gang, since they believed that it was all of the Lapras, though Naomi's detector in the submarine of course showed that 2 of the Lapras were missing. Now, how did Naomi know the exact number of Lapras that were regularly there? Well, she did study them, so let's assume that she just counted before. Knowing that 2 Lapras were gone, Naomi examined them and found out that the leader was one of the ones that were still gone. To make matters worse, a whirlpool then approaches and threatens to suck Ash and gang and all the other Lapras inside, as Brock worries that the 2 missing Lapras could have already been caught in a whirlpool and lost as a result. Just then, though, despite the whirlpool's glaring loudness, Lapras signaled that it could hear the other 2 Lapras and told Ash and the gang and the rest of its Lapras herd to follow it through the whirlpool. Desperate to find the 2 Lapras, Naomi was hesitant to follow, as she didn't detect any Lapras in the radar's range, aside from all the ones that they had just found, obviously. But she soon realized that Lapras could have been able to hear the other Lapras' cries and songs so well that it was able to hear them before it appeared on the radar. So Naomi followed Ash's Lapras and the other Lapras as they were singing their songs to each other to communicate with each other to guide all of their movements, as well as Ash and the gang's movements in the submarine to make sure they didn't get sucked into the whirlpool while swimming through it, while also simultaneously singing out for the missing 2 Lapras. Soon enough, Naomi suddenly noticed the 2 missing Lapras appear on her radar and came to the conclusion, absolutely amazed, that the 2 missing Lapras must have somehow been able to hear all the other Lapras' songs and calls, despite the background noise being caused by the immensely loud whirlpool, and how far away they were, realizing that the Lapras had been able to hear the Lapras' calls way before her radar that she thought was pretty good was able to detect. So essentially, she realized that the Lapras had really good hearing and her radar sucked ass. Naomi then looks on her radar again and sees that there was an island in the distance that all the Lapras were heading towards, meaning that the 2 missing Lapras had to be on this island, and they were, as the whirlpool had taken them and Team Rocket in their Gyarados sub onto this island, somehow unharmed, along with the 2 Lapras. Team Rocket were not grateful for being unharmed, though, as they complained about 3 goddamn things. 1, how exhausted they were after being washed up by a whirlpool. 2, how they were stranded on an island, as their Gyarados sub didn't work very well now. And 3, how they only had 2 Lapras left. Jessie was annoyed by a 4th thing, though, which was that the 2 still captured Lapras were crying out and singing immensely and very loudly, which was annoying her as she ordered them to stop. Unbeknownst to her, though, this was of course the 2 Lapras' way of calling out to the other Lapras as they soon arrived on the island, along with Ash and the gang and Naomi, as the submarine surfaced. Team Rocket were initially cheered up when they saw only all the other Lapras show up, as they figured that they could just easily recapture them without having to go through the effort to find them now. But now that they saw Ash and the gang, they were ticked off and angrily refused to give back the other 2 Lapras when Ash demanded that they did, going as far as to send out Arbok and Weezing to stop Ash and the gang. Ash goes to send out one of his Pokemon to battle them, but Brock wanted to impress Naomi, so he decided to send out his Crobat and had to use Sonic Boom on Arbok and Weezing, weakening them for a while. With Arbok and Weezing down, Naomi and Misty went to go free the 2 Lapras from the net, but Meowth jumped in the way and threatened to use a scratch on them with his claws if they tried to free the Lapras. However, Meowth couldn't do jack shit, as Ash then jumped in with his Pikachu and had him use Quick Attack to knock Meowth down to the ground, allowing Ash, Misty, and Naomi to free the 2 Lapras who reunite with the other Lapras. Since one of the Lapras captured happened to be Ash's Lapras' mother, the 2 were very happy to reunite. Just then, though, Arbok and Weezing had recovered and were about to go launch a Poison Sting and Sludge at all the Lapras, but all the Lapras fought back, including the 2 that were just rescued, using an Ice Beam to freeze Arbok and Weezing. With Arbok and Weezing frozen, Pikachu then stepped in and used Thunderbolt to send Team Rocket blasting off, destroying their Gyarados sub as well, making all of the Lapras very happy as they sing out with joy. The next day, Ash and the gang and Naomi in the submarine, as well as all the Lapras, returned to the pier, but unfortunately, it was now time for all the Lapras, including Ash's, to leave once more, so that they could migrate once again. As Ash and the gang and Naomi were saying goodbye to all the Lapras, though, the leader Lapras then said something to Ash's Lapras, and Ash's Lapras went to its mother, seemingly hesitant to accept something that the leader must have just offered it, but when Ash's Lapras' mother gave it comfort, Ash's Lapras took the lead of the herd and led them off to go migrate, indicating that it had become the new leader of the herd. Determined to do a good job, Ash and the gang were extremely confused as to what was going on, as they couldn't understand what the Lapras were saying or anything like that, but Naomi, being the Lapras expert, explained that it seemed as though the leader was very impressed with Ash's Lapras for taking charge and being able to lead the rest of the Lapras to help find it and Lapras' mother, so therefore it felt as though Ash's Lapras deserved to be the leader. Despite Ash's Lapras being busy leading, it takes the time to look back at Ash one more time and nods to say goodbye to him. Ash says his last goodbye to Lapras as well, congratulating it on its new leadership role and stating that he would work hard to become a Pokemon Master if Lapras worked hard to lead its herd the best it could. With the Lapras now gone, Ash and the gang and Naomi return to the Pokemon Center, and Naomi calls Elm to tell him about what had happened with the Lapras and explains that she can finally complete her thesis on Lapras' migration patterns, now knowing more about them. She then brings up the egg, after Elm had noticed Ash and the gang come into frame, with Ash now holding the egg case with the egg inside. And he reminds Ash to now take the egg with him to New Barktown so that he can drop it off at Elm's lab, and Ash, of course, obliges. Especially after Naomi requests him to as well, as she really wanted to see what was inside the egg, and knew that Elm would be the best person to research it and know what to do with it. Ash and the gang then leave the Pokemon Center and wave goodbye to Naomi and her lantern as they continue on their journey back to New Barktown, going along the eastern Johto shore.